on the window, so she starts scratching at the
you want Kish Queen? is where the young woman's family lives.
Yeah, it's usually not an issue for me though.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Oley Valley School District Board of Directors Committee, Combined Committee meeting for February 9, 2022. Roll call, please.
Pollock,
Here.
Heckman,
Here.
Piper. Here. Vacan,
Here.
Jackson,
Here.
Keller,
Here.
Markley,
Here.
Perry,
Here.
Zakin.
Here.
Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to announce at this time, we have no plans for an executive session. However, should the need arise, we'll consider it at that time, go into executive session. We're going to move to the school program first. Dr. Rohr.
Good. Can you see me, Ming? No? Just go like that to advance it when I get there, okay? Good evening. My name is Scott Rohr. I hope I'm not a little, if I go too fast, just tell me to slow down. I am a hyper individual, and at the same time, and I'll cover some information here. We're going to talk about MTSS, which is multi-tier systems of support. How it started about 2 years ago, we wanted to begin trying to address students' needs, looking at student data, and then put a specific plan in place to address each student based on their needs and what the data shows us. So as I stated, 2 years ago, we started this process. Unfortunately, we had this thing called COVID hit at the end of the year. So we were able to put the idea, get the written framework in place. Ms. Peach is with me tonight. She basically help us create and design this whole program as far as how it looks and how we identify students and the process that we use. But in essence, it's an opportunity for us to look at data and then try to put things in place to support students' needs. So MTSS is multi-tier systems of support, is a framework to address academic needs, behavioral needs, social needs, and in some cases, mental health needs as well. Go ahead. When we have an MTSS program in regards to a tier system, there are 3 tiers for MTSS. And the 3 tiers involve your tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Every student is on tier 1. In essence, the tier students, they have the basic instructions. All teachers have standards and curriculum that they're to follow. That's considered tier 1. However, about 15% of your population may need extra supports and in place or interventions, as we call them as well, that I'll go over here in a little bit, in order to address their needs. And that's about 15% of the students. And then a tier 3 would be even more interventions and supports for those targeted students, and that's about 5% of your population that these students have in regards to 3 tiers of MTSS. So to go through briefly then, the next slide then, you have the 3 different tiers. Tier 1, general academic and behavioral, as I stated, everybody has. Next slide. Tier 2, it's more targeted instruction, supports in place. Students will go to a period. There might be a rise time that we have during the day where students get that extra support. And then you have tier 3, as I stated, is the most intense tier that we have, where we identify those targeted students that they have some interventions. Now they need more. It may be a placement. It may be other interventions, but really they need the strongest support in order to meet their needs. Okay, so that's tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. In order to make this happen, a couple years ago, we created a new schedule, Bell schedule. Part of that is we added a period called RISE. RISE stands for remediation, intervention, support, and enrichment. And again, that period was designed for this MTSS process to work. We have an MTSS teacher, Ms. Brinkman, who again has been marvelous during this time and has contributed a lot to this program and to making this a reality and actually starting to address students' needs, utilizing data. She's been a great individual. She may be on tonight, so I want to make sure she gets that praise because she has done a lot with this program. And you can go to the next slide. So when we talk about an intervention, what is an intervention? An intervention is anything a school does above and beyond to meet that student's need. It may be the student we have 2 teachers, long-term subs that we have this year in both math and ELA. They may push out into a classroom. They've identified the student that needs support, and therefore they may help that student work with the classroom as the teacher's working on something else or with some other students. That teacher or someone else may work with that student in the classroom, or they may go to MTSS or RISE and get that could be an intervention. Okay, so again, it's additional support and practice. Next slide. Universal screening. How do we identify and what data do we use to drive instruction or to identify students' needs? In particular, we use classroom diagnostic tools or CDTs. It's an assessment that we give to students in the fall and in the winter. This year, that's kind of been our best predictor as far as where students are, because last year and the year before, due to COVID, the assessments we gave were very poor indicators of where students actually were. To be honest, last year when we ran the MTSS process and did that, we were doing a lot of catch up with students because they weren't in school, in and out of school. It was very difficult to judge what students were learning, what were they missing, things like that. As you all know, this wasn't a good time in our history dealing with kids in and out of school. So in order to start that this year, it's really been a blessing this year to start where we can use these classroom the CDT was used then as the main predictor of where students are. So we can look at that data in ELA and math, and then specifically see if they're below basic or basic, if they are proficient, where they are, and whether they need supports or not. Beyond that, we have an academic achievement battery. Let's say by chance they're not the best test takers, things like that. We have a tool that we can use for students. We can pull them in. It's a very quick assessment, ELA and math, achievement batteries that, again, assess the students to give us an idea of where they are academically and to let us understand, do they need supports or not. Social skills improvement system. We have executive functioning that we get on, planning, how to prepare notes, things like that, time management. Believe it or not, those are all part and parcel of what you do when you try to intervene or support a student and intervene. Those could be tactics that you can use to support that student and intervene and give them what they need in order to be successful in the classroom. We can do reading inventory, social skills, all those things are included. Okay, next slide. We had data review team meetings. So as a group, the last couple of years, we've put teachers together. We've identified, utilizing the data that I explained. We'll have meetings, literally the whole team meets every other month. That would be all the teachers that are on the MTSS team. We have Ms. Peach joins us at times for those meetings as well. Our school psychologist may join us as well at some of those meetings. So it's a full team, guidance counselors, teachers, and then we review every student. And literally, is there something popping up? Is there a need here? And then we try to see how we can intervene and give that student support to be successful. So the team analyzes the data. Are students meeting grade level expectations? We ask that question. Are students showing progress? If they're not, what supports do we need to put in place? And then the team determines research-based interventions. Then we try to identify, again, what things can we do to support that child's needs. Okay, next slide. So to give you an idea, in essence, how this might work, and in a nutshell, as far as what we're working for with these students. This is an example of actual student that we have who they complete their evaluation. They had an initial ELA CDT score where they scored about a 749, which would be in the red as far as the score we had. They completed their winter CDT score, so they took it in the fall. They took this again in the winter, and they scored a 998. They're up to the green level. So they made progress, which was an increase of 249 points. The student moved from red to green. Student has now moved from tier 1, where they were getting many supports, back to tier 1. And that's how the program should work. You try to do the intervention, see what the student may need to get them the what they need to build on, what skills they need to build on to be successful, and move them on from there. So in this case, it was obviously a success. We used IXL as a program that we have that we use to support students' needs. Again, teachers use it as homework, but it also is a diagnostic that we can get a report of how students are improving in specific areas. Ideas and examples of what interventions are: in-class support, where another teacher may go in and support that student in the class. IXL, where we have programs and other things where the student may use. We have tutoring sessions specifically with the teacher. They can be pulled out too. And then during MTSS, our period or RISE period that we have, students do check-ins during the school day. They can do it through Schoology. And again, we started that process in September. So that's one example of a tier 2 student and kind of the things we're doing to help that student progress. Next slide. Okay, so here you have a student in math. The last one was ELA. This is math. So they scored 705 in the red in the fall. In the winter, they're still in the red, but went to 958. When we look at school success and things that we should target is progress, where they started the year and where they're going. Growth, are they achieving growth? And this is rather significant for a student when you think a student is here, yet they moved to here. That is huge. So in that time, they were red in the fall. The red still, however, they had over a 253-point gain as far as their success on the assessment. Again, we use the IXL diagnostic report. And then what interventions for the student have we been doing? In-class support, using the IXL, mini lessons taught to them on a 2 days during RISE, which we started in November with the student. Attended review sessions as needed during Link's period. And then we did check-ins during the school day and through Schoology, which we started in mid-September. So again, the idea of MTSS is pretty simple. It is the ability to try to utilizing data, looking at our students as a whole, every student in the building, trying to identify those targeted students where we see concerns at, and then putting a prescription in place, as it were, to help them be successful. That's the idea of the program. Is it 100% successful all the time? No. But what we're doing is building that program, and I think as we grow and do it, we're going to see more and more success. Specifically, as we get and grow teachers to do more direct instruction, have the ability to do so, we'll see more and more gains. But from what I'm seeing now, and considering last year, and as the dive students took during the last 2 years, we are seeing that growth. And it is a program, that I'm proud that we have in place in order to move forward academically. So I'm very proud of that. The schedule we have, students, again, during that rise period, we also have clubs where we look at enrichment. I said enrichment was a part of that, and that's the one piece too. We have students that are here, but we're also trying to address and seeing how we can address those students that want more enrichment, not just the students at the bottom who need support that way. So next slide. That leads us to questions. Lynx Pride. We're all proud to be here. I'm a big Lynx fan here. We're all here, positive here. That's what I'm talking about. But I'm here basically to address kind of what we're trying to do for our students in the classroom and get to that academic success. Any questions?
Dr. Rohr, this is a
Yes.
very valuable tool with what we just went through to get our kids back on focus.
Yes.
And up to where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, if we did not have this in place last year, we were basically really trying to get students to pass, get them to where they need to be, and this was huge in that success, getting them through the year last year. Good, to say the least. Sorry.
I'd like to know how you did these evaluations for your new program, and if this program is going to replace that system or in addition to that system.
And you mean how it was done in the past? I'm not sure what your question is.
How was it done in the past? You did evaluations before, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Before I got here, as far as I know, there wasn't a specific program in place. They did look at data, how it was used. But when I got here, this is my third year. When I first got here, we put this plan together in order to specifically key in on data and utilize that data to address students. So I honestly, I can't speak to before I was here. I know what was in place. Nothing like this was in place when I started. Dr. Shank, am I correct there?
I didn't hear the question, sorry.
Was there anything in place like this before I started 3 years ago?
In the middle school, no.
Yeah, okay. I didn't think so. Yeah.
A lot of times I know the system is hard to take personal help, for the personnel to do that. But they could target the areas that you're finding, if they are aware of them, and get help from sources or themselves, might be very beneficial for them to be aware of that. But get more of a response and follow-up. I thought they had this program 5 years ago, and problem in the system, try to meet all those their parents directly.
Parents are communicated with, our NPSS advisor will communicate with those parents. However, more input from parents usually comes when there's more intervention for those more needs. Initially, it might just be the basic while maybe they're coming to the NPSS to get that work. Because beyond that, just last week, and we're still scheduling them, there's 7 or 8 students and parents that we met with, went over what we're doing and what else we can do. The opportunity to parents put and how this program is definitely going.
Is the cost on this covered by the special education budget?
Well, it's a district budget. I don't think it's under special ed. It
No,
would be
it's
under
actually in the
district.
instructional. It doesn't cost us any more. It's just a different way of using resources we already have. So it's taking what we already do and reformulate. What he's done in the middle school is taking the resources that have already existed in that building and reallocating the strengths of the personnel and the programs that we have and using people in the programs in a different way to better target the students that we call academically at risk and getting them the resources that they need in middle school. Because, young people can kind of, I hate to say it this way, but kind of breeze through elementary a little bit more. But then when you really get to middle school and it's more content driven and really kind of you're reading to learn now and content based, and your expectations academically are really starting to increase in preparation for high school. It's been there. They start to struggle more, but they're not special education. They're academic, regular education students that didn't have really a kind of a catch-all to get those kids up to where they need to be before they get to ninth grade. So what we really have seen is when they get to ninth grade, they were really starting to struggle in the first 9 weeks of high school. And it's a big jump anyway, socially and emotionally for ninth graders, but academically, they were really struggling. So what Dr. Rohr and Mrs. Finnerty at the high school has worked on very hard over the last 3 years is that transition between middle school and high school. And what Dr. Rohr has done in the middle school is really kind of put a system in place that the students that are behind academically and have made it through elementary and done okay, but then hit the wall in middle school and need more reinforcement in basic reading and math skills, have a program where they can get the support they need, are still in their academic classes, are not special education, but just need reinforcement by reallocating the resources that have already existed in that building. So we haven't had to put more money or more programs in it. He just have taken what's already there, reallocated the strengths of the building with people and the resources and created this program to really target that. And then we're starting to really see at the high school, they're not struggling as much when they get up here and they're able to come in on college placement or honors level courses and really start to fly in ninth grade. So even in the last 2 years with COVID, we've seen our ninth graders coming in stronger academically and not struggle as much academically because we're getting to them earlier in middle school and not have what used to be kind of viewed in middle school as a holding kind of more social, more social place to be in, but not strong academically. Our middle school is starting to achieve academically. And that whole continuum into high school is really excelling.
Easy example of that would have been the schedule change, adding that ride, which I know students for the most part like that time during the day because they can tackle those interventions and get support. And even a regular student who doesn't need this intervention, that kind of supports that student.
Right. And sorry. And there's been also a big focus on executive functioning. How do we organize? How do we, like we grew up kind of taking notes and having notebooks, but students today have so much more to manage and how to learn to manage their time. How do they organize? How do they organize their thoughts, their materials? And in the old days, we all had our trapper binders and all of that. How do they do it in the world in which they live in? Because they have so much more than any of us did, 20 years ago. All of that stuff is in there. But even the students that are on or are advanced academically, they have enrichments and extensions because you could always learn to read better. You can always learn to more comprehension. You can always learn deeper. You can go deeper, not more, but to really extend your learning. So all of that is part of this. So the MTS is presenting tonight is only one component of really enriching that whole middle school experience to get all students prepared for high school, regardless of which end of the system that you're on. But we're really starting to target those middle school students, even in what we would call the college placement level, because they need to be prepared for a global society that they're going to change careers 4 or 5 times and have those basic skills. When they get to high school, they can still explore all these avenues and have those skills to be able to succeed, whether they're in the STEM area or the fine arts area or the English areas or the humanities area, and be able to bounce around to figure out where their strengths are. But really kind of continue that whole academic piece of that. And that's what part of what he's really done a phenomenal job in the middle school. And increasing the rigor and the fidelity of that, because in the past, honestly, you only had to pass English and math to get out of middle school. You could fail science and social study and everything else and you go to ninth grade. And I know even with Dr. Markley, when he was principal, and ninth graders would come in and not be academically prepared. And then you hit the wall in high school and everything counts, your GPA, your credits, your graduation, and then you're behind the 8 ball. So the whole academic focus has been phenomenal in the change, even with COVID in the middle school. The middle school staff has done a phenomenal job. Sorry.
Yeah, just to clarify in my mind, it seems very similar to RTI.
Yes.
Is that correct? Only it's at a middle school more.
Right, RTI changed. No, RTI is now to response to interventions. It used to be, actually, I think it started off RTI, then it was RTII, now it's MTSS.
Okay, that's
And
my
so,
question.
and yes, and so it's called now generally as MTSS. And I'm sorry, Mia, you said, what did you tell me earlier? You told me earlier.
Differences between RTII and MTSS. Yeah, not just is an intervention, how do we implement it?
So is this,
Kind of another level.
is this at the elementary level or we have something different?
No,
now?
you-
It's
It's the same
elementary.
thing.
If you have the
It's
elementary.
changed from elementary.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, it seems more like RTI on steroids.
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep. Spot on.
And then it has the executive functioning component,
Right,
too,
and
which
that's
is
huge.
huge in today's world, which RTI didn't have.
Okay, thank you. Just to.
No. Yeah.
What happens to those who don't sell that?
What's primarily, you can look at this also, then a recommendation for an IEP or special education. So it's kind of looking at students and identifying and getting their support. And then those, at that point, there could be an intervention that would be recommended for an IEP.
The key is not to put a label on a student before you absolutely have to, because once they're labeled, that changes their trajectory for life forever. So if you can get them the interventions they need and the help that you need, which we tend to refer to them as curriculum casualties, sometimes they miss something along the way for whatever reason without putting labels on students. So it keeps that, give them everything you can to help them before you have to go down that path. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rohr.
Yes.
I said, thank you,
Oh.
Dr. Okay, we'll move on to introduction of guests. However, if you will indulge me, I actually have something I'd like to say first. It is my understanding that there will be people speaking this evening to address comments and actions of two of our board members. There currently is a petition online pushing for the ouster of those board members with over 500 signatures last time I checked. There's also an open letter to the school board from concerned alumni with over 450 signatures last time I checked. So obviously the words and actions of these board members have struck a chord in the community. The open letter from the alumni was forwarded to me last night by someone very special to me. It is articulate, it is emotional, and I agree with many of the sentiments. I did not have time to read all the personal reflections that are within, but several that I did were very heartbreaking. So if I may, I'd like to quote something from that letter. We caution all board members to remember that their jobs in this community are those of public servants, elected officials whose jobs as leaders are to represent and protect the interests of all persons within this district. I emphasize all persons within this district. This letter, numerous emails, social media, and other communications, I've read them all. Of course, they all speak to me on a personal level, and they all speak to everybody else differently on personal levels. We all view things through the lenses of our own experiences and beliefs. Now, all this controversy surrounds a discussion pertaining to a policy concerning discrimination in Title IX. As Mrs. Piper and Mr. Keller spoke their minds, the rest of us sat here relatively quiet. As a result, we have all been accused of complicity by silence. That could not be more wrong. When the time came for a vote, the policy was approved as written by a 6-3 roll call vote, so everyone knows how each board member voted that evening. The truth of our convictions is represented in the votes that we openly cast in public. So please do not judge this board as a whole because of the words and actions of a few. Now, the new members of this board were duly elected by the Oley Valley School District community back in November and legally sworn in December. They were elected to this board because of their personal experiences and beliefs, and like it or not, are allowed to express their views on items before this board for consideration. To be perfectly honest, that is the responsibility to those who voted them to this board. Call me an idealist, but I believe in our system of government. I believe in a representative republic as designed by our founders. That system must allow for differing points of view, no matter how upsetting they may be. So while I may disagree with some of my fellow board members, I will defend their right to be here. And I will do my best to respect this. That's the system and the opinions of others. So thank you for that. Please. So we're going to move on to public comment. I have 14 cards. As a lot of people who've been here before know, we generally limit public comment to 30 minutes. At 5 minutes duration, that only usually allows for 6 people, but most people do not use the full time. So if the board will indulge me and the audience would indulge me, I would like to get through all 14, but if you could try and keep your comments at 3 minutes or less, I think that's fair. That's about 40 some minutes. I think that will get everybody in and we can get through all this tonight. So for those of you who might have longer comments, if you care to edit them, we will have a hard 5-minute out though. So if you do go beyond 5, I mean, when we get to 3 minutes, I might give you a hand wave, but I'll have a timer on for 5 minutes, and at 5 minutes, we will have to shut you down. So the cards we got, these are just in the order Dr. Shank gave them to me. First name is Mary Young.
Hello, everybody. Mary Young, Alsace Township. I guess I gotta say that. I wanted to come back today. I know I spoke on Monday, but I wanted to come back today because I thought it was really interesting to hear why the issues of transgender individuals became a problem. There was a concern over safety of possible sexual abuse of our children, specifically our girls. And I was really struck that although that was the reason that this was brought up, all of the examples that were given on Monday were of heterosexual men who identified as male. There wasn't a single example on Monday of somebody who was transgendered actually sexually offending. What's interesting is the research correlates that. We know that transgender individuals sexually offend at a really low rate. It's under 1%. Do you know who by far and large is the largest population that sexually offends? It's straight men. You can actually boil it down more. It's straight white men. You can boil it down even more, straight white Christian men. And there's reasons for that that my time is not going to allow. And why do I know that? I know that because this is my specialty. I do a lot of advocacy for this work. I speak regularly to courts as an expert witness. I do evaluations for the court, including I did an evaluation on a teacher who sexually offended earlier today. That is my job. I own a business with 6 locations in 5 counties providing services to individuals who sexually offend. It's my passion. So to use that as a reason to discriminate against transgender individuals is really heart-wrenching because there's no accuracy in it. Now, I don't hear calls for us to not employ white men or straight white men as teachers. Well, that would be absurd, and everybody would think that was awful. The idea of a male walking down our hallways with a student wouldn't raise an eyebrow, but the idea of a transgender individual doing something did. That really comes from a place of ignorance, not of actual harm or concern. But I would like to point out that as a mother of a young son, I want male teachers. I want good, strong male role models in our schools. So I don't support that whatsoever. But if we're really going to say that we're doing this because of concern over safety, then we have to look at the real problems. And I would like to pose, if the board is really worried about this, ATSA, which is the Association for the Treatment of Sexual Abusers, it's the national organization, is a great resource. Mid-Atlantic Association for the Treatment of Sexual Abusers is the the local chapter, and they have great resources. If we find that there's poor boundaries in our teachers and our staff with our students, then that's a great place to start structuring how do we go about putting mitigation steps in place and making sure that our schools are safe. Now, I know lots of teachers that are friends, and they have students as social media friends. I don't know why they're Facebook friends with their students. That's a clear boundary in my profession, but I know it's commonplace. So it would take a huge paradigm shift to do some of this, but it's there. Huh?
Just 3 minutes if you can wrap it up.
Yeah, okay. Well, you just slowed me down now. And so I just want to say that please really think about the reason why. I do think that this came from trying to motivate through fear, and that's never a good reason to bring something to the board. And so I do think that as a community, we need to make sure that transgender individuals have a voice. You are on the board to represent them, making sure that there is a safe place. Transgender individuals are far more likely to be victims of sexual abuse than actual sexual offenses. So please educate yourself. Make sure that there's resources for the students, including books, rather than banning them, to make sure that they can find ways to validate themselves and find community. I have a lot more to say, but obviously I'm not going to get through it. I'm glad it struck a chord. Apparently we needed to have this conversation in our community. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Next name is it Kira Nicholas? Kira Nicholas. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing these names. Maybe it's Nichols.
Hello, and good afternoon. My name is Kira Nicholas, and I would just like to talk about how some words on the board affect the students in the building. As a student myself and other students, I get to see how these words affect people in the Oley Valley Middle School. I would just like to say that some words said by certain people on the school board weren't the nicest towards the people I know, especially because I am friends with a lot of trans and non-binary students. But they don't exactly know about the school board, but I know there are some students who do know, and it has affected them greatly. I think that it's interesting how a lot of people on the school board believe that we are the future generation, but you won't let the future generation be happy with who they are and their gender because it seems to bother you. It shouldn't matter your student's gender or what they identify as because it doesn't affect you personally. If the student identifies as a boy but was born as a female, that shouldn't affect you because it doesn't affect you. And in the future generation, when you are old, because that's how aging works, and in the hospital, you're not gonna ask if they were born a female or a male and how they present themselves, because it doesn't matter in that situation. So it shouldn't matter here, and it shouldn't matter in school. All I'm saying is your comments, they just don't matter because it's not a thing that affects school. So please keep your comments school related.
Thank you, Kira. Ms. Berry, Debbie Berry?
Debbie Berry, Oley, PA. The block I live on is made up of people with wildly different political views. However, there is not a single one of them that I do not get along with. Some of you may be surprised to hear that the big flags that fly, the Trump flags and Let's Go Brandon and the F Your Feelings, are some of my closest friends on my block. Because while we disagree politically, we agree on many other things. We respect each other and we celebrate our differences. We have to learn to be respectful of others as adults in this room. We have to set the example. We have to learn that while people have different opinions, we have to treat each other with respect. I hear hate speech in what some may say is the very heart of our community. It is our school. If the school really is the heart of our community, then why should it not be a safe space for every person in this community? The bigoted comments made in this room by adults is not the Oley Valley that I know and love. The Oley Valley that I know and love is represented on my street where we accept each other for our differences. The Oley Valley I know and love is where we help each other shovel snow, where we help the elderly, where we help the single mom or the person that's working. The Oley Valley I know is sharing the bounties of your garden or the eggs from your chickens with your neighbors. The Oley Valley I see in these board meetings is not that Oley Valley. It was brought up that problems were brought up that are in Loudoun, Virginia. Oley Valley is not Loudoun, Virginia. To compare Oley Valley to Loudoun would be like comparing Oley Valley's crime rate to that of Chicago. There's just no comparison. We do, however, have our own issues in this school. In the past month, the elementary school had 2 incidents that should concern this entire community. The first was a child brought a keychain pocket knife to school. That was the first incident that should concern all of us. How was it brought to school? Why was it brought to school? I know the child didn't harm anyone, but it was still there. The second happened on my first grade child's bus, where another child got in a physical altercation with another child and tried to stab them with a key. These are the issues of Oley Valley. These are the issues we should be concerned with, not what's under the clothes of children. I would like to remind the board that there is a difference between a statement and a question. Questions should always be welcome. This is how we learn and this is how we grow. However, the comments made were not questions, they were statements that landed you in the newspaper.
Minutes.
I just would like to add that this school should not be a place for hate.
Thank you, Mrs. Berry. Next card I have is Ernest Slagle.
Good evening, school board. Thank you for allowing me to speak before you today. I want to address two comments made at the January 10th meeting. One was that there are only two genders. The other is, how are we going to protect our children? Sex and gender are terms that are often used interchangeably, but they are in fact two different concepts. Even though for many people, sex and gender are the same. Sex is defined as referring to the biological aspects of an individual as determined by their anatomy. Gender is a social construct relating to behaviors and attributes based on labels of masculinity and femininity. Moving forward here, because I want to keep it inside 3 minutes for you and give everybody else a fair chance here. As the last speaker said, words matter, especially when they are statements, not questions. The use of the word protect can have a visceral effect on people in today's society, which may lead them to harm individuals that are targeted, in this case, transgender individuals. I have been on the murder scene of transgender people. It is not pretty in my career. The gay community, LGBT community, has a history of persecution going back even before World War II. But in World War II, Adolf Hitler and the SS rounded up nearly 100,000 gay men. And although they were arrested, although they were not all directly sent to Birkenau and marked for immediate death, they suffered unusually cruel treatment in concentration camps. They had their testicles burned off of them, and 15,000 of them were exterminated. And the others worked themselves to death through Hitler's extermination through work program. In Nigeria, Iraq, Iran, Zimbabwe, LGBT individuals in these cultures don't exist, are beaten to death, correctively raped, to make them women, or publicly hanged. In the United States, since 1969, with the Stonewall riots against one of the many police raids in gay bars, there have been many more reports and instances of violence against LGBT people in the United States. Dozens of transgender and gender nonconforming individuals are murdered in the United States every year, and the murder rate of Black transgender women is especially prevalent. I've seen this with my own eyes. The attacks against LGBT people revolve around the idea that there is a normal way of life, and which encompasses all expressions, desires, behaviors, and roles associated with the gender each person is assigned with at birth. We want to keep them as who they were when they were born. Throughout time, the number of statistics of these acts of violence have increased due to the belief that religious and political views, or perhaps other factors as well. Political protests have done what they can to crack down on the more of the attacks that happen to this community with greater penalty. That's why I got the LGBT ordinance passed in the city of Reading for non-discrimination.
3 minutes.
Yes, I will wrap up here. Thank you. The idea of human dignity is that all human beings, regardless of race, sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, creed, color, or culture, enjoy the same basic value and deserve fair treatment in public and private, and merit the same basic protection by law. The LGBT community is not predatory criminals. They are human beings. Thank you.
Mr. Slagle. Next card I have is Reverend Donna House.
Thank you for hearing us tonight. We are here to represent the Oley Ministerium and the Oley Lutheran cluster pastors of the area. 3 members of clergy ministering to children and teens attending Oley Valley School District are deeply concerned that comments disparaging trans and LGBTQ are putting lives at risk. We would like the members of the board to be aware of the following research. As the Institute of Medicine has noted, LGBT youth are typically well-adjusted and mentally healthy. However, they experience higher rates of mental health challenges and increased health complications arising from these challenges compared to their heterosexual peers. Research on transgender youth outcome as separate from lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth outcomes is more limited. Some recent surveys of self-identified transgender people indicate that up to 1/3 reported attempting suicide at least once, with higher rates for youth and young adults than older adults. Moreover, suicide is the third leading cause of death among youth ages 15 to 24. This does not mean, however, that LGBT identity itself is the cause of these challenges. Rather, these higher rates may be due to bias, discrimination, family rejection, and other stressors associated with how they are treated because of their sexual identity or gender identity and expression. These challenges, which researchers refer to as microaggressions, can contribute to anxiety, depression, and other mental health challenges, as well as to suicide and self-harming behaviors. Words matter, as you've heard earlier tonight. Before you say anything, we respectfully ask that you ask yourself, what if my child was gay or lesbian or transgender and heard my negative remark or comment? What if my child committed suicide because of unkind and derogatory remarks? Ask yourself how you would feel. We respectfully ask that you model compassion for all teens and all children. And we respectfully ask that you issue an apology for your remarks, for your discriminatory remarks. And I read this letter on behalf of the Reverend Kim Truenbach, Deacon Kathy Schaefer, Deacon Joy Gerhart, the Reverend Robert Whitmire, Reverend Gregory Fry, Reverend Dr. Tyson Fry, Psalm Chuck Sheridan, the Reverend Donna M. House, the Reverend Eugene Zeiser, and the Reverend Rebecca Knox. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend House. Next card I have is Nate Wolf.
Hello, I'm Nate Wolf. I live in Alsace Township and have 3 kids that go to school in Oley. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. After the bulk of the last few meetings' time comprised largely of informing board members of the duties to which they've been appointed, earlier this week, we parents were charged by members of the board with reading them. I've spent some time doing this, and I'm seeing a lot of incongruences between the policies and actions of members on this board. What are the consequences of this? Oley School Board Policy Manual Code 002 describes the powers of this board. Chiefly among them, the board shall establish such schools as are required for the education of every student residing in Oley Valley School District. Every student? Why are we spending time asking if we can deny services to certain children? If this verbiage is in question because of the residency requirement, Code 011 says Pennsylvania school boards are committed to providing every student the opportunity to grow and achieve. Again, every student. 011 also charges board members to act ethically and ensure compliance with local, state, and federal laws. Yet a member of the school board at 1 hour and 7 minutes of the January 10th meeting on YouTube appears to admit to discriminatory and illegal hiring practices, saying that when we were talking to transgender people, quote, if we were to hire a teacher, teachers go through such a vetting process here that if they were to sneak through with that, I don't even see it happening. This has been referred to the ACLU for action. 2 members of the board went on a Christian political webcast for an organization whose website says they, quote, train and mobilize churches and communities to restore Judeo-Christian values to schools. This is a clear violation of the principle of the wall of separation of church and state, as Thomas Jefferson assured us would always exist. A school is not a church. This is no different than board members trying to establish Sharia law in our schools, and I urge parents to resist it as if it were that. I urge parents who want religion in schools to send their kids to one of many fine religious schools and to leave our public schools alone. This has been referred to the Freedom from Religion Foundation for action. The description of that webcast, by the way, says the members are talking about the resistance they're getting from fellow board members. Now, code 011, violations here abound. Speaking in official capacity for other board members, not abiding by a majority decision, not working together in a spirit of harmony, not promoting open, honest dialogue, not honoring the sanctity of executive sessions, and not recognizing the absence of authority outside of a collective board. These are serious code violations for member conduct, and combined with the other ethical and alleged legal violations, I would like this board to invoke code 001's lead responsibly tenet of requiring, quote, participation in professional development, training, and board retreats, end quote, and to censure these members until such training on diversity, equity, and inclusion is complete, in order to avoid liability introduced by the irresponsible and discriminatory remarks on record. We don't want our money to go to paying frivolous lawsuits. We want to go to the kids. The only defense offered for any of these remarks is the dodge, I'm just asking questions. The Rational Wiki describes this discourse method as, quote, a way of attempting to make wild accusations acceptable by framing them as questions rather than statements.
Yeah, 3.5 minutes.
And when all of your questions collectively fall under, how can we discriminate against people I don't like? You aren't just asking questions, you're making a statement. When the people you don't like are children in this community, you are derelict in your duty to provide them the services to which they are legally entitled. You try to scare us that women's sports will become irrelevant if transgender members are allowed to compete. Yet transgender athletes have been allowed to compete in the Olympics since 2004. Before this year, none have even qualified. And only one's expected to medal as part of the Canadian soccer team. Statistically speaking, we have transgendered students in Oley Valley. If they have not felt safe to come out, that is an indictment that should shame us all. Numerous studies have shown that gender affirmation is linked to less depression and lower suicide risks for trans youth who otherwise have substantially higher risk of both. You remember when you were expecting a baby and people asked you if you wanted a boy or a girl? You likely answered, it doesn't matter to me, as long as it's healthy. Let's keep that mentality and do our jobs to create a healthy environment for every student in our school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Next card I have is Rachel Winterstein.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Winterstein. As a 2004 graduate of the Oley Valley High School and now a parent of 2 kids in the school district, I am proud to be here tonight as a representative of the 500+ former Oley Valley students who have recently signed an open letter to the school board, which was formally delivered this afternoon. These alumni, who span 7 decades of graduating classes from 1965 to 2021, and hail from 33 states and the District of Columbia and 5 countries, have come together now to address and denounce the discriminatory sentiments expressed or endorsed by 3 school board members during recent meetings. Though we represent a variety of identities, belief systems, cultures, lifestyles, and occupations, we are united in our condemnation and intolerance. We believe all Oley Valley students deserve to receive an education that is respectful, equitable, and free of hate and fear, regardless of their race, color, age, creed, religion, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, ancestry, national origin, marital status, pregnancy, or disability. These are not characteristics students or faculty members can abandon at the schoolhouse door. They are essential components of every individual that make us whole and inform how we interact with the world around us. We are gravely concerned by the statements recently made by 3 district officials, which have no basis in fact or science and directly endanger the health, safety, and livelihoods of the LGBTQIA+ students and faculty. These comments directly contradict the recommendations of the medical community, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, and promote exclusionary policies that result in consequential harm against LGBTQIA+ youth. Schools are often sources of lifelong trauma and pain for these students, who experience increased rates of bullying, othering, and victimization in comparison to their peers. However, they can also be sources for safety and community when they are actively foster environments that create alliances and promote inclusivity for LGBTQIA+ students and faculty. For too long, students outside of the dominant culture have been subjected to bias, bullying, and exclusive within this community. For many of us, it was not until we left the Oley Valley that we recognized the nature and impact of these incidents. We were uninformed and unprepared to enter a diverse, increasingly global society that was composed of beautiful people who did not love, look, pray, speak, or live in the ways we had been accustomed to, expect, or accept. But we have examined the role we may have played in allowing this dangerous cycle of prejudice to continue. We're open to continuing education, and we are actively trying to make the world a better, more inclusive place for all people. To those within the Oley Valley who have been negatively impacted by complacency, ignorance, and hate, you are not alone. We see you, we honor you, and we stand with you. We stand together now across ages and regions and life experiences to ask those who have been entrusted with the health, safety, and education of future generations of Oley Valley alumni to be willing to learn about the dangerous effects their words can have on all members of our community. We, the students who entered to learn and left to serve, come to you now in service of our successors who deserve safer, more equitable spaces for growth and achievement for all. We, the products of the education provided to us by the Oley Valley School District, ask you to model our alma mater's virtues of pride, honor, glory, and perhaps most importantly, love. We urge current Oley Valley School District leaders to take the following important and necessary steps. 1, seek out readily available information from the global medical and scientific communities about LGBTQIA+ experience and affirming transgender lives. 2, receive expert guidance and training about the impact of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility on students' educational opportunities and outcomes. 3, reflect upon the ways in which unconscious and conscious biases in the community can negatively impact students' educational experiences. 4, implement and uphold policies that affirmatively protect individuals from discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. And most of all, listen to the views, experiences, and needs of all community members with empathy, understanding, and acceptance to create a truly inclusive space for all Oley Valley students, faculty, staff, and families. I encourage you to start by reviewing our full letter online and reading all 64 statements that have been submitted by brave alumni, detailing their personal reflections and experiences of discrimination, harassment, and bullying in the Oley Valley community. It truly was devastating to read, and I cried when I read it. So I invite you to read it and maybe gain a little empathy from the situation. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Winterstein. The next card is Jamie Wagner.
Objection, not an Oley resident.
She's a member. She represents a community group in Oley.
Huh?
She represents a community group in Oley.
Yes, I'm representing a community group in Oley tonight. I am also an alumni from 1999. I have 2 children graduated from Oley, 2011 and 2015, and I have a current student in the middle school. I stand before you tonight to educate you, since you have chosen not to seek information and education for yourself. For all the LGBT students, I am an ally. I see you, I hear you, I am here for you, and I will always stand up for you. Last month, I watched the meetings in horror and dismay at the language and discrimination directed towards LGBTQ community. Let me say this loud and clear. No one here has problems with asking questions. Nobody. Nobody has problems with asking questions for clarifications on policy and procedure. That is not, however, what happened last month. There were far more discriminatory statements made than questions asked. It amazes me how some board members will stand here with tears in their eyes about masks children have to wear and how sad it makes them. And yet at the same time, you wrote down a policy, a federal law that protects all children and their education from discrimination. 52% of LGBT young people enrolled in middle school and high school reported either electronic or in-person bullying in the past year. Data also shows that 43% of transgender youth have been bullied on school property compared to 18% of cisgender youth. 29% of transgender youth have been threatened or injured with a weapon on school property, compared to only 7% of cisgender youth. That should make you cry. That should bring you to your knees. But instead, several of you voted no to a policy to protect them. The idea that some of the board members think their cisgender heterosexual children need protection from transgender people or anyone from the LGBT community is absolutely absurd and completely unfounded. Our LGBT students need protection. So I ask you, do you really care about the students in the district? All the students in the district? Or are you just here to push your political agenda? Let's talk some facts about transgender. To use the description of transgender as a lifestyle is misguided and damaging. It furthers the misconception that being trans is a lifestyle choice rather than an innate knowledge that a person's gender identity differs from the one they were assigned at birth.
A few minutes.
Transgender is about self-identity on the spectrum of gender. It's someone's innermost concept of self as male or female, a blend of both, or neither. It is how an individual perceives themselves and what they call themselves. Let this be very clear to you all. Transgender has nothing to do with sex or sexuality. To somehow suggest that a transgender person is a questionable person or engages in pedophilia is perhaps the most discriminatory statement made on January 10th. It shows your lack of knowledge, prejudices, transphobia, and bigotry. Furthermore, it is absolutely perverse that any of you think you have the right to know what genitalia a child has beneath their clothing. Transgender is also not a mental illness. Contrary to the statements made by board members and the host of the Kinetic Faith radio show. The mere fact that the board members chose to go on the show, politically motivated radio show, which operates under the guise of Christianity, and I am a Christian woman, claiming they are victims of bullying is absurd. The rest of the board is the rest of the board aware that these two members thought it was funny to joke about my assumed gender on their radio show, yes, and repeatedly called out my name on air. These board directors' actions certainly do not align with the board director policy 011 or the oath they took when they got into office.
Let's bring it, time's up. The next card I have is Mary Harris.
Mary Harris from Russell Manor Township. I'm speaking on regards to preserving our republic, as was mentioned before. I have information here from the Epic Times I read this week. It's warning how organizations like the Black Lives Matter are replacing the American narrative with Marxist indoctrination. There's a phenomenon being observed in America today, an attempt to change reality, to foster a new Marxist revolution. There's a man, Mike Gonzalez, pictured here. He's from Cuba. He was born in Cuba, communist country. His concerns, like some other people I know, is that he has spent the first 12 years of his life in a communist country in Cuba that has made him recognize right away how the culture was destroyed. He says, I know how a country was destroyed. Now America is my country. I don't want to see happen to America what has happened to the country of my birth. What is happening is the communists who trained the founders of BLM organizations took their cues from these cultural Marxists of the 1920s. So what we see with Black Lives Matter, what we see with the 1619 Project is to replace the American narrative, to replace the idea of America from all men are created equal, we're all free, with this idea that we're an awful country, that our history is hideous and our system is racist itself, that the system must be changed. Most people believe reality can't be changed because they believe in an ultimate and fundamental truth, in natural law or in God, but Marxists don't believe any of that, Gonzalez says, the man from Cuba. Try to follow me, I'm trying to give you a background here. To dismantle, okay, the Black Lives Matter used the death of George Floyd as an excuse to change society. He said, Gonzalez said, to dismantle the organized principle of society. Now that was the co-founder, Alicia Garcia. Now she's here and I quote her, both the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter. Okay, the BLM founders say they are trained Marxists. They quote, "We actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia Garza in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists," Patrice Cullors, a BLM co-founder, said in an interview. Cullors trained for a decade as a radical organizer in the Labor Community Strategy Center, established and run by Aaron Mann, a former member of the Weather Underground, the 1960s radical faction identified by the FBI as a domestic terrorist group.
3 minutes, ma'am.
The group, originally called Weathermen, said that it was dedicated to the destruction of US imperialism and the achievement of a classless world communism. Garza was trained by this school, of which the founder of Italy's Communist Party in the 1920s said that the West in societies as a strong civic society, you need to have a war of position. That is what we have today. Except here in America, we practice it through the lens of race and critical race theory. The core of Marxist thought is that family, the nation state, private property, as well as the belief in God and religion had to be abolished. This is what the founders say in their own words. The communists who trained the founders of BLM organizations took their cues from these cultural Marxists of the 1920s. At a 2019 gathering of progressives in Maine, Garza said, quote, "America itself was founded on violence, steeped in white supremacy, and predicted on theft and genocide. We're talking about changing how we've organized this country to keep dismantling the organization principle of this society. In 2020, we had months of destabilization." On and on. I have to try to, okay. "The organization has been spreading its curriculum that promotes critical race theory in this country." This man has written a book, this man from Cuba, Gonzalez, called BLM, The Plot to Change America, How Identity Politics is Dividing the Land of the Free. Okay, he's written 2 books and he's trying to expose the Marxist infiltration in the United States. I don't know how much time I have left. Just to give you an idea that we do want to preserve our republic. We don't want to have a Marxist country, but it is being recognized by experts. They are warning that we are replacing our society with what now is world communism.
Next card I have is Candace Coral.
Candace Coral, Pike Township. I'm not going to read what I wrote. It will take way too long. I'm going to respect your time. I want to make mention that there's been a plot against a few people that's been going on for almost a year now. There's been bullying, there's been harassment towards certain individuals that turned into they got voted onto the board, and now we're going to attack them in a different way and call it not bullying because they're on the board. And they're now part of being a public figure. We got to stop that mentality. That's not bringing people together. If anything, all you're doing is you're making people want to go after what you find passionate more and more. So I want to address something too, because I sat in this room and I heard the discussion when we talked about transgender, and somehow along the line, somebody took some words and changed them, because the discussion wasn't transgenders going into a bathroom and sexually harassing other people. the discussion was if you open that door to allow the other sex into the bathroom, you're allowing anyone, whether they're heterosexual or whatever you want to label them, put women at risk, little girls at risk. So let's keep to the fact, the questions are being asked. This has not happened in how many years? We've never sat here and watched the school board deliberate. They actually ask questions to the point where I feel like it's been more transparent in the last 2 months than it has ever been. You guys have created new committees. You have a communication committee. You have a suggestion box committee. People can come to you with whatever they want. It is amazing. So if we don't think that there is good change happening, make a suggestion. Stop bringing your Facebook stuff over here to a school board meeting to think that they're going to solve your problem. It brings you right back to your children being mean to other children. It has nothing to do with the school. It has everything to do with your parenting style. If your kids are making fun of other kids, if they're bullying them, if they're not educated enough in their home to know how to treat a human being, don't bring that stuff here. We don't want to hear it. This is the talk about the stuff that matters. And when I say talk about the stuff that matters, I have a few things that I wanted to give suggestion to the actual curriculum, which is the reason why we're here. So there was a suggestion to have the solicitor come to the committee meetings, right? I want to ask, can we please have the solicitor come at least until the new 3 board members feel that they have that legal support during those review meetings to make the appropriate vote in the next meeting? I'm just putting that out there. We talked about school code. It drives 90% of what we do. And from what Dr. Shank said, some of this is dated back to 1949. I think it would be really nice if it's not going on now, that if the school could have some type of school code education to get them grounded. Because let's face it, Dr. Shank, no matter who comes in here, they're not going to replace you 100%. What's that?
That's 3 minutes.
Okay. Most people miss this, but there was a direct correlation to Dr. Shank being considered that workhorse, and then we're asking other employees to do more. We need to really be careful with that with retention. I just want to bring that to your attention. The policy review process, we're dumping 40 policies on there for review. We're giving people 30 days. We all have so much going on. I'm asking if we can do quarter reviews to kind of increase the people that take the visibility or the time to look into that. We have complaints from parents on screen time. I wanted to know, we have a fenced-in area at the middle school that's for classroom use. Can we start utilizing that, or at least ask the teachers to put into their curriculum, maybe enforce a time of technology related course? We have a bus shortage. Have we reached out to any of the CDL type businesses in the area to see if there's some type of co-share with employment? I don't know if we're thinking outside of the box, but I have other suggestions as well that I can submit. And then when it comes to talking about the endemic, I think maybe that's something that we need to continue doing and having discussions on how we're going to move out of this COVID phase and take the next step in our life and moving that over to a communicable disease. And then the last thing was the trades, and talking about that. We have a curve goes up, education's down. We think dumping everything into education to meet that curve is going to do a good thing, but what we're doing is we're behind the curve. We've already missed that opportunity because trade demand is high. We need to think about a more moderate, across the table curriculum to go after businesses, trades, and people that are looking to do, PhD level business stuff. That's all I have. Thank you.
Next card I have is Stephen Harris.
Harris from Resco Manor Township, and I am one of those white male Christians, strong Christian. As a Christian, and I know a number in the community represent fundamental Christian values, and the issue of gender and things is a hot topic here. I've seen this is my first time here and observing what's going on. And I would say from a Christian perspective, I'm to love no matter who you are. However, understanding Christian values, biblical Christian values, I am a teacher, a biblical teacher in the Oley Valley for 30 some years, and teaching and preaching. I'm one that has my values based on biblical interpretation of what the Bible says. And there is a moral issue here from a biblical Christian view of sex orientation and what the conflict and things that are going on. And it's a difficult one to try to match. Well, how do we deal with that? And to me, I think there is an issue for my children if they were to attend and go into a bathroom. I don't want someone that's not, if it's my sons, someone that's saying they're male, that's a female going in there. That's to me a moral issue from my Christian faith that there's a problem there. And I think it has to be addressed and dealt with in a way that's not bullying or putting down whatever someone else feels they want to be, but there needs to be sympathy for those that do have these values, which I have, and I know many in the community have, and that it is a question of trying to maintain a sense of order in your school, because I agree that we're here to educate our children in the fundamental areas of math, science, and English. And those areas should be the concentration and not these other issues. I think let that up to the parents to teach their children. But again, you have to deal with the issues when they come together. And I would ask the board to work together and let everyone express their values and opinions, but in order to work together and to come to resolutions on how you can work where you do have certain communities that are going to be different than others. There will be. It's a matter of how you will deal with that and follow your policies and trying to accept both of those views, whether one accepts the other or not, is how will you manage those working together.
That's 3 minutes.
And so, again, I'm being educated on this system. I'm familiar with the writing. I've been there for 38 years. And so I'm trying to understand my own system where I live in, because I am an Oley resident. So those are my concerns.
As far as Randy Fatkin,
Brandy Fatkin, Alsace Township. We've had 4 kids that were in District 1, graduated last year. I just want to really, this is for everyone out here to listen to, talk about an issue that we had with our senior this year. And some questions that maybe Dr. Shank can answer for me at some point. So last year when we were virtual, my then junior he was really struggling with one of his classes virtual. Struggling with not so much material, but the amount of work. It was exorbitant amount of work. He was up until 2 o'clock in the morning, many school nights, doing work for just one class. There was some issues with him not passing that class. He had a 0 on an assignment. I questioned why he had a 0. There was apparently an unannounced pop quiz. He could not log on. The computer gave him an error. He went to his brother's room, said, I have an error, help me out. They couldn't get on. The teacher gave him a 0 because he couldn't get logged on. Even though I called the school and his brother verified that there was an error. So he had a lot of problems with that class. And a week before we went back to in class, I called the counselor and I said, look, this is a problem. His other grades are going to suffer. He can't be up until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning every night trying to do work for this class. She agreed. She said, I've heard a lot of bad things about this class. There's a lot of issues. She said, I'm hoping it's just because it's not a class that is designed to be taught virtually. Once we get back into school, it'll be better. I said, okay, we're going back to school that next week. Give it that week. Went back to school that next week. It was horrible. It was the same exact way in person that it was virtual. I called the counselor again. I said, what do we do? You can't do this for a whole year. It's not going to work. She told me the only option was for him to drop all of his classes and enroll in BOL. That was the only way he would be able to drop that class. I said, fine, that's fine. If that's what we have to do, he'll do a year of BOL and then he'll come back his senior year in person. So that's what we did. Fast forward to this year, he's applied to his colleges. I get a letter from the college 2 weeks ago saying that he does not have his required class. He does not have his higher maths. I said, how can that be? I called the counselor, a different counselor from last year, new counselor. She looked at his transcript right away. She said, yep, she put him in the wrong math at DOL. So now I have a senior who cannot get into the colleges that he's applied to because he is missing a higher level math. He was enrolled in that higher level math virtual through Oley, but when the teacher switched him to DOL, she switched the wrong math. I had a conversation with the counselor when we were switching, and I specifically said, these are the colleges he wants to go to. He wants to be a science, he wants to go to the College of Science. I know that they require higher mathematics, so we need to make sure he has it. She guaranteed me that we had him.
Just your heads up, it's 3 minutes.
Yeah, she guaranteed me that we had him. He did. So my question, and the second counselor, when I talked to the second counselor, she asked why he went to BOL and didn't come back to class. And I told her about this one class he was having problems with. That counselor said the same exact thing. Oh my gosh, I've heard a lot of people have problems with that class. That's a difficult teacher. That's a difficult class. So my two questions are, one, at what point, if a counselor is getting repetitive complaints from students and from parents about a specific teacher in a specific class, how's it addressed? How do we figure out where the problem is? And number two, what are our safety checks to make sure that kids are getting what they need to apply to college? When I, as a parent, told her the college, what his major was going to be, I knew that he needed the higher math. Why was it missed? And it's something he can't do anything about it now. It's over. It's done. He can't do anything about getting into that major at this point. But I don't want it to happen to another kid. So those are my two questions.
Yeah, they're good, because I have no idea what you're talking about. Because nobody contacted me at all, because I would have been all over it.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why a student who, I could see if it was half a year at VOL, but there's no reason at VOL you have to spend all year.
So, well, I don't know that he had to spend the whole year, but that whole first semester.
Usually it's semester break.
Yeah.
Because how VOL aligns with.
But, I was told when I called the second time and spoke to new counselor, said, well, a little bit of that is parents' responsibility to make sure he's registered for their classes. And I understand that, but I didn't see his VOL classes at all. The counselor registered him for everything. She took care of everything. I got to pick one elective. She said, there's one class that won't transfer, so pick that elective. And she sent me a list of electives by email. He picked that. She said, his English is going to be the same, his math's going to be the same, everything's the same.
Yeah, you need.
Obviously it wasn't.
We need to meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Okay.
if we do have an option of getting a higher level math between now and graduation, there's a way to do it.
Okay.
But I don't really want to say it out loud, but I do have a plan. I always have a plan.
Well, and I have to respond because that's absolutely.
It's absolutely not acceptable.
Ridiculous and unacceptable.
It is unacceptable.
For 16 years, I would always get a phone call from a parent, and we've had very rigorous teachers, and there would be a communication and very nice meeting to discuss these topics. And
Yeah.
Dr. Shank will find a way.
Yeah.
I had conversations with principals, with the teacher, so and key counselors. There's been lots of conversations.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't
eventually
even-
that conversation, if you don't get what
If
you
you know what you
want,
want, somebody should have called me
right there, the next call is right
or
there.
walk down the hallway.
We got
Exactly.
a resolution.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I don't even, I'm here all the time. I'm second shift. I'm
Okay.
here.
We can move on, please.
Oh, sorry. That just annoys me.
Next card I have is James, I'm sorry, is it Fisher? Sorry, I can't quite make it out. James Fisher?
Just a few words. My name is Jim Fisher. I've lived in Oley my whole life. Graduated in 1964, so a year older than the last person on the young lady's list. And I am also a Christian man. And as a Christian, I have some issues also with some of the identification that people make, whether they're older or younger. I have a problem with that. I'll accept that problem. However, it's the school district's responsibility to take care of each and every kid that's here. Find a way to do that so that they can learn in a safe environment. And that safe environment may have to do with bathrooms or locker rooms, classrooms, off in a corner someplace where somebody gangs up on somebody. The responsibility here by you to take care of providing that safe environment. So somehow you got to find out how to do that. It sounds like there's a whole lot of incidences going on that maybe need to be addressed, whether it's bullying or people, well, it's all bullying, which is not something that's supposed to happen in the school area. So I'm only here to say that as a Christian, as a conservative, there's values that I have that I would really like to hang on to, and they are being challenged. And I just like to see the school do their job. The kids, teach the kids as best they can. If there are issues, and when there are issues, not if, when there are issues, address them. Take care of it. Just a sidebar thing here. We see things going on in the news all the time. Smash and grabs, the carjackings that take place. That's happening because the system that is supposed to protect people is failing. They need to change. But all I'm saying, we're here. This system right here needs to take care of our kids. They're transgender, they are fluid, if they're whatever. They're here, got to find a way to take care of them. And at the same time, protect the young ladies in the ladies' rooms and the locker rooms from potentially being used. So those are my words. I hope the school board, new school board, can work together to accomplish what needs to be accomplished, realizing that some are conservatives, some are liberal, some are who knows what. But you are the school board. Try to handle it.
Okay, last card I have this evening is Diane Kappa.
Last but not least, I hope. My name is Diane Kappa. I was a teacher in the district for 30 years. I have 2 children who attended here who are in their 30s, and my husband was also on the school board for several years. I want to add my voice to many voices that you've heard this evening. It's with great concern that I've been watching the events of the last few weeks unfold. There's been a focus on the comments of a few board members in particular who have made several homophobic remarks and apparently feel as though the right to be protected from discrimination should not be extended to all of our students. This way of thinking is surely cause for alarm. The world is changing, and our students don't just leave their sexual orientation at home. As board members, you are not here to insert your personal and religious prejudices into public education. Although I do respect your views, I really do. You are here to support all of our students, not just those who look like you, or pray like you, or live or love like you, but to support all of our kids so that they can go out into the world with confidence to serve and, yes, to lead. While these inflammatory comments have been made, they've been countered with the argument that lack of compliance with federal and state laws could and would result in fines, legal fees, and loss of funding. And while this is important, an equally important reason to comply with Title IX that I haven't heard mentioned very often is that preventing discrimination and harm to our students is simply the moral and right thing to do. While it is true that your voice reflects, or your vote rather, reflects your voice, it would be good to hear your voice as well. There's an open letter from alumni, referred to earlier tonight. It has hundreds of signatures from people who span several generations of students here. It's followed by a comment section. What is written there is truly eye-opening and heartbreaking. Our students speak of loneliness, isolation, thoughts of suicide, bullying, and fear of being their own true selves. The comments come from our handicapped students, the LGBT plus community, students of color and different ethnic backgrounds. They refer to Oley as having a toxic and unsafe environment. The thing is, I remembered almost every single former student from my tenure here who signed his or her comment. I remembered them because as a teacher, I saw them being bullied and marginalized, even at the elementary level. This should not and cannot be acceptable. How can we support all of our students? It is incumbent upon all of us to educate ourselves. For example, do we all even know what LGBTQ stands for? Are alliances and clubs offered? Are there counselors and designated staff members available who have special training? Earlier, I hope that we consider the suggestions for support that Rachel talked about earlier when she read her statement. The Oley Valley is a beautiful place, and our schools have done an excellent job in educating many, including my own children. However, there's work to be done to eliminate bigotry and hate that some of our students face every day. Though we lack diversity, we can still teach and model tolerance, acceptance, and appreciation for people who are different. It's our job, and I mean the job of the entire community, to embrace, protect, educate, and create a safe and positive learning environment for all. We need to do better, be better.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Kappa. So that is all the cards we have for tonight. I'm going to cut it there. So moving on to the rest of the agenda. Well, actually, let me thank everybody for the comments this evening and your time this evening, coming out and spending some time with us. So moving on, Solicitor Report, Mr. Mancuso.
No report this evening.
Mancuso, Administrative Report, Dr. Shea.
No, I just want to answer Mrs. Corl's questions. PSBA offers free trainings on school law. It offers, posts all the school code citations. They're all on the website. They offer online trainings. They offer trainings in March. They go through all of that. I have no problem going through every policy line by line and explaining what all of it means. I have a strong background in school law. I waited to update the manual so the new board members are seated specifically so they understand why schools operate, public schools operate the way they do. Private parochial and cyber charters do operate under different rules and regulations. So I purposely waited to redo the manual. Our manual is out of compliance, which is why there are so many changes, as Ms. Piper does ask. Some very legitimate questions about the policies and why this word changed to this, because it is out of legal compliance, but I did purposely wait to do that. The CDL piece, yes, Quigley, our bus drivers do not work for the school district. They do work for Quigley Bus Company. They have reached out with the partnership through the governor's office and getting CDL drivers. Even the CDL drivers that do drive truck do not want to drive for school buses. It is a very different type of driving when you're driving 65 students around and you really can't discipline them. And they don't sit in their seats, and it is a different type of driving than driving a truck and being by yourself. We have worked very closely, continue to work very closely in the trades with BCTC, although our enrollment here at the high school has dropped over the last couple of years. Our enrollment at BCTC has not. We send more and more students every year to East and West Campus. They are, all of our students are doing extremely well in the trades. Most of them are going out on co-op now second semester. They are getting jobs in the fields that they are getting educated in before they even leave and making really good money. We do start exposing them to the trades in elementary school as well as up through middle school, and they are completed their applications and are awaiting their acceptance for next year. We have a very strong partnership with them. We try not to do what we call parallel programs and offer the same programs here that BCTC does, only because it's a kind of a waste of money. They do have the academies or the clusters in the area and the equipment, but we do offer a lot of, since we're so close, they're also using our property and some of the other areas and the large equipment and the quarry and some other pieces. And then, of course, building the houses here in Oley Valley, so we get the tax dollars as well for them. But a lot of those trade pieces are, but we also have our STEM Academy, which is for all students, who doesn't get the manufacturing and the trades and the CNC, and then working with Mitsubishi and Leban's and some of the other major businesses in Berks County, getting our partnerships and our internships going to get the students who aren't heading to 2 or 4 year universities into those trades areas. So we have been doing that. And the other area that I just want to, I've been sitting on it and I've been waiting and I'm just kind of like tired of hearing it. But the board has a policy that they do not teach nor endorse CRT in our classrooms. And I keep hearing in our curriculum and I keep hearing CRT in our schools and CRT in our schools. We have a policy that specifically says that we do not teach that in the Oley Valley School District. And it's in our diversity policy. So I would, just so that people know that the board has already made that decision, that they don't teach CRT, they do not endorse CRT in the public education in the schools. And I don't know if people know that or not, but I just thought I would put that out there tonight. But other than that, I think I hit all your questions. If I didn't, just let me know. Send me an email. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shank. We on to committee reports, budget and finance. Dr. Markley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have one motion for action this evening. I would like to take it as stated.
We move to motion number 1 as listed. Jackson seconds that motion. Any questions or comments on the BCIU services? Okay, hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Piper?
Yes.
Atkins?
Yes.
Heckman?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Keller?
Yes.
Markley?
Yes.
Perry?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Stackey?
Yeah.
Motion approved.
Under information, it's reported that the Oley Valley School District has been awarded 2 competitive Safe Schools Initiative targeted grants in the amounts of $19,999.04 and $24,999 respectively for the 2021-2022 school year. Number 2 is the opt-out resolution for 22-23 was submitted to PDE via the CFRS system on December 16, 21, and has been accepted by PDE on December 20th, 2021. 2022 winter PASBO school budget report is presented for review. Our upcoming meetings are listed. That's it for budget.
Thank you, Dr. Markley. We're on to personnel, Mr. Heckman.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. The committee has 11 items for action. Most of these were reviewed at our committee meeting on Wednesday evening. If there are no objections, I'd like to take items 1 through 11 as listed.
Objections? Okay. Mr. Heckman moves motions 1 through 11 as listed. Dr. Markley seconds that motion. Any questions or comments on those 11? Just a second. Look through real fast. Any questions? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Atkins?
Yes.
Heckman?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Keller? Markley?
Yes.
Perry?
Yes.
Pollock?
Yes.
Stackey?
Yeah.
Piper?
Yes.
Motions 1 through 11 are approved.
Thank you for that. And our next meeting is scheduled for March 7th, and that's what I have to follow for personnel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heckman. We're on to policy, Dr. Factory.
Thank you, Mr. Pollock. We have one item for action tonight to approve the following new policies, 200 section programs for first reading as listed.
Is it possible to extend the review time, just like this Coral asked? Because it
Well,
is, there are a lot of.
Ms. Jackson seconds motion. Now you can ask all the questions you like.
Sorry. Yes, is it possible to extend the time so people could actually properly review the policies and have the questions for the next?
So my understanding is the policy, the school board policy on your adoption policy requires a 30 days.
And which policy is that? Can you give us-
Yeah, it goes back to committee in March 7th, and then it goes to second reading, and then. The 300 come out.
Yep. So as far as changing the timing, that's the board policy. If you would want to have more time with these policies, I would suggest a motion to send them back to committee and bring them back then.
Okay, then I will do that.
So there is a interceding motion. Is there a second to send them back to policy?
You want to second that motion, Mr. Parker's motion?
I'll second.
Seconds that motion. Walk me through it. Like I said, motions inside of motions get confusing. So now we're going to vote on the motion to basically table this first motion or send the policies back to the policy committee. So again, we're going to vote on sending the policies back to the policy committee for consideration.
Mr. President, yes is to send back.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking for clarification. Okay, are we ready? Dr. Shanky, roll call vote on that.
Well, we're voting on to send them back to committee, which would be in March. For the first review.
At least we consider it that time, then the committee can
Starts
decide,
all over again.
then the committee can decide that time where they want to commit to.
For first reading again.
Right.
So, and it, just so for my, so I would have the 200s and the 300s on March 7th.
Well,
So I have the 300s are coming out on March 7th.
we can discuss that at that time, I guess, whether we want to move forward with all of them or not.
Well, I need them, because all of this, just so the board is aware, this all drives your handbooks, which all have to be done by July 1. Because it affects all your contracts, your agreements, it drives your student handbooks, it drives all of that for 2023. Yeah, I mean,
I
just
understand
so
what you're saying.
I mean,
We can
because you don't
discuss
want
it.
to like, here's the student handbook, Dad, and then have your policy change for your students. You know what I mean? They all do a publication in June, that's why. Want to make sure that's why the timeline is to get them all done by June, so that parents aren't getting incorrect information. That would be not be good communication. I just want to make sure that I have it right, so when I do.
No, I mean, I guess we can discuss it more in committee.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because I have a tickler file of everything I have to do. So I just want to make sure I move my tickler file where I need it to be.
So again,
Don't
just
get any more overwhelmed. Okay.
can clarify, yes would be to send it back to committee.
So who first and second, now that I know what I'm doing.
Mrs. Piper and Mrs.
Thank you. Jackson.
No.
Keller. Markley.
Yes.
Perry.
No.
Pollock.
Yes.
Zachary.
No.
Piper.
Yes.
Vacuum.
Yes.
Heckman.
No.
The yeas have it 5-4. So the motion is to send them back to committee, so then the original motion is no. Got that, Mr. Patrick, or Dr. Patrick?
Oh, I'm up. Next meeting, that's it for me tonight. Next meeting date, March 7th.
Dr. Patrick. Curriculum, Dr. Markley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 7 motions for action this evening. If anyone would like me to remove one specifically, please let me know. I will do that. If not, I will take the 7 as listed.
Motions 1 through 7 is listed. Mr. Heckman seconds that motion. Questions or comments on motions 1 through 7? Okay, roll call vote.
Keller.
Yes.
Markley.
Yes.
Perry.
Yes.
Pollock.
Yes.
Zaki.
Yes.
Piper.
Yes.
Atkins.
Yes.
Heckman.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Motions 1 through 7 are approved.
And our next meeting date is March 7th, 2022. That's it for curriculum.
Thank you, Dr. Markley. Property and Transportation, Ms. Piper.
Motion to approve the following van and bus drivers for 21-22 school year. Charles Straber, William Harrison, Barry George.
Ms. Piper moves the motion number 1. And seconds the motion. Questions or comments on motion number 1? I don't think it carries. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Don't have next meeting date yet.
Thank you, Mrs. Piper. Student activities, Ms. Jackson.
I have 4 motions for action this evening. I'd like
Mrs. Jackson moves the motions 1 through 4 as listed. Mr. Heckman seconds that motion. Questions or comments on motions 1 through 4? Again, I think we discussed these earlier tonight, right? Question? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Perry.
Yes.
Pollock.
Yes.
Zaki.
Yes.
Piper.
Yes.
Atkins.
Yes.
Heckman.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Keller.
Yes.
Markley.
Yes.
Motions 1 through 4 carry.
Under information, a reminder, information regarding the district's agreement with the BCIU and John's Driving School for in-class and behind-the-wheel driver's education services can be acquired by contacting the high school guidance office or may be found on the district website. The agreement is through June 20. Next meeting date is March 7th.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Legislative Committee, Mrs. Zaki.
Thank you, Mr. President. Governor Wolf delivered his 8th and final state budget on Tuesday. He presented a $43.7 billion spending plan, which includes an emphasis on education. The new spending includes $1.55 billion increase in basic education funding and an increase of $200 million for special education. Governor is estimating that school districts will receive an estimated $373 million coming from projected savings gained from the proposed charter school funding reform. The governor renewed his goal to increase the minimum salary for teachers to $45,000 and the state's minimum wage to $12 per hour with a pathway to 15. Forward to seeing what this translates over that.
Any chance it's going to be passed?
Minimum wage.
No, but just the budget in general.
Oh, not before, yeah.
And charter school reform, does that actually get any traction?
Been 12 years.
It's a lot of words right now.
Also, PSBA Spring Advocacy Day is Monday, April 25th. You can do it in person or virtual, and PSBA will coordinate your appointments with legislators.
Attending? We can discuss it later. Thank you, Mrs. Zaki.
Thank you.
BCIU, Mrs. Jackson.
That's under information. There's 4 reports there that are available. Meeting date is February.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Ag Advisory, Mr. Keller.
No new information, Dr. Chang. And what the House fundraiser is exactly.
The The FFA's having the Yellow House is their restaurant fundraiser. If you have dinner there that night, they get a percentage of the proceeds.
What percentage?
Remember, it's on the Facebook page. They just posted it, and the alumni meeting was tonight. So
Better off if you RSV.
yes, please.
Nothing more or less other than the.
Yep, and the egg banquet's coming up next.
Okay, put it on the phone. Okay, thank you, Mr. Keller. We have nothing recorded on negotiations at this time. PCTC, Mr. Heckman?
Thank you, again, Mr. Pollock. Our information from our JOC meetings is provided, and our next meeting is the 23rd, which will be at Westfield.
Berks EIT, TCC, Mrs. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Pollock. I don't have a report tonight, and our next meeting is March 31st.
Thank you. Communications, Mrs. Perry?
I have no information or anything tonight, just reiterating the fact that if you have questions, go to the website, there's a place there, you can see it, put your questions there, and we will answer them. And our next meeting date is March 7th.
Mr. Perry, Secretary Report, Dr. Shanks.
District events are listed through March 29th, and just a reminder to board members that you need your statement of financial interest.
Dr. Shanks. Under other, I have a motion to approve the 2022 Health and Safety Plan and exclusion chart changes as presented. They were discussed on Monday. So I move on that. Seconds the motion. Any more questions or comments on that revised health and safety plan and exclusion chart? No. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Pollock.
Yes.
Zachin.
Yeah.
Piper.
Yes.
Atkins.
Yes.
Heckman.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Keller.
Yes.
Markley.
Yes.
Perry.
Yes.
Motion approved. Under information, it's reported that the Oley Valley School District utilized a flexible instruction day on Thursday, January 20 and Friday, February 4th, and had a 2-hour delay on January 21st due to inclement weather. Information is presented in 2022 BCIU Board President's meeting regarding Central Board leadership and governance summaries. Any unfinished business?
Actually, I saw there are new people in the audience. Can we please review again the chain of reporting when there's bullying occurs? So the first, second, third contact, and at which point people should actually CC the entire board as well. Because some of us sometimes not even aware of things that bullying is taking place. Board members.
So you're
Just a chain of command for everybody to hear, to make sure it's followed, to make sure somebody seeks help. Bullying,
right.
yes.
So you want all the instances of bullying brought to the board?
No, I'm just saying, could you please review the steps of
Okay.
reporting bullying
Okay.
for everybody that's in the audience?
But when a child is being bullied, then they address it with the bully first and say, please stop that. And if it doesn't stop, then they tell the closest adult, whether that be a teacher or paraprofessional. If it doesn't stop there, then they report it to the office, and then the office takes care of it. And then if the office, then they need to tell their parent, and then the parent should call the principal. And if the principal doesn't do anything about it, then the parent should contact me.
So is that,
Okay, yeah, I wanted to make sure that everybody knows and actually timely reports bullying. Because one of the things that's been hearing over and over again, that those instances are not known. That's why when you can't address what you don't know.
right.
Correct.
And one very important thing, been a long evening, but it's really important that those administrators, as Dr. Shane has always told them, keep documentation for all those things that come down. As an old guy, I used to write every single thing, what class took place, what was said, who the people were that heard the comments, in case we had to go to that next level with the law. The other thing you need to know is the thing that really ties our hands and tied my hands and is tying Dr. Shank's hands is these things occur outside the purview of the school district. At night, at midnight, these kids are sending stuff. And then it's carried on the buses and carried into school. And that's why I said the other night, if the bus driver heard something, they get the administrator right away, and we try and take care of that right away. And I know these administrators are doing the same thing. It's so difficult sometimes when somebody yells a derogatory term in a hallway, and a young person's walking down that hallway and goes, I think that might have been directed at me. That happened to me in high school. So I wasn't exactly too thin in high school. So I got some name called and abused, and when they yelled that name, I took it personally sometimes. So we got to keep that documentation, and we certainly have to help every individual. That's where our administrators are outside the hallway, our teachers are outside the hallway. Those students should never fall through the cracks of this building, ever. And it's so difficult to monitor every single student. When I did it, my key was lunch duty. Not that I didn't like lunch. I love lunch. But for me to be in there every single minute was the point where I would go to these kids that needed help or were sitting alone and sit with them, to be with them. And I did enjoy that. And I did that with everybody that I know that's sitting here now, with one of my students. So if I missed a student that needed help, I'm very upset about that. And it's been 6 years since I've been in this building. But when I read those things, it really upsets me because I couldn't see every single thing that took place. But I certainly tried. So the documentation is crucial. Okay, that's all I want to say.
But also remember that the law has changed, and if it happens on social media outside of the school, we are not permitted under the law to deal with it. You have to call the police.
Right.
And the same thing, we have to have proof. So if Ming says that Mrs. Zakin said something that Dr. Facken might have said something, we cannot act on it unless we can prove that it actually happened. And sometimes, especially in middle school, you get what we call the frenemies, friends today and not tomorrow, and then some of them, they make stuff up. If we can't prove it, it has to be persuasive and persistent as the definition of bullying. So just because somebody says it, we have to do our due diligence, you have to investigate it, you have to prove it, and then we take a hard stance on it. But just because somebody reports something, we have to show that it actually did happen and just not take the word of one student over another student. You still have to run the investigation. But some of the stuff comes through on social media and we get accused of not taking action on it, but we cannot address it if it does not happen on school property or have what's called a nexus to the school environment or disruption of the school environment. So if it's texted on a Saturday night and it happens at home or you're getting spam phone calls and people are calling your house at all hours of the night, you got to call the police. And a lot of parents won't do that. Or you're getting inappropriate images on your student's phone. That seems to be the big thing right now, is very inappropriate pictures being sent of other young people. You got to call the police. Like, you can bring that phone in, but we can't do anything about it because it did not occur in school. And that's where a lot of this social media stuff is really, and the kids have multiple accounts. One the parents can see, and a lot of them the parents don't even know they have. They're double, triple layered deep. They're very tech savvy, and a lot of the stuff they have on their phones or on their iPads or their non-school devices is worse than anything we have in any of our school libraries. We see it because they have them on, they can get around our filters because it's their personal devices, not our school devices. So bullying is very different than it was even 5 years ago in all three schools.
Any other unfinished business?
I brought those things from the manufacturing lab. I just figured I'd show them because I still think the push toward getting these kids maybe geared toward trades is very important in our society nowadays. So I'll just pull it up quick. Not anymore, but this is the kind of stuff they're putting out in manufacturing lab. So I highly recommend that class. Look at my son's face when he produces, an extra tangible project. It's really powerful. I'm not sure how to put this thing together. My wife can probably do it, but that's.
Hold them up and
There we go. Say it loud. Not a doctor would. Sorry. Out there as well. So manufacturing lab, I highly recommend it. Just good things there. Not to promote my son doing a great job. This is kind of stuff they're putting out there. So I'm doing a great job there.
Thanks for
That's it. That's all I gotta say.
Thanks for that.
Hey, you want to buy it?
I have one, as a matter of fact. They've been doing that for a long time.
Dr. Beckett, thank you for following up on that. And as we talked before, the current technology center is really the nucleus for these kind of trades within Berks County and within the Miller Valley School District. The one thing I'd offer to the board is it'd be difficult to have a meeting there right now with our schedule already. February, you look at the end of the year, it's going to be very, very difficult to schedule a board meeting at East Campus. So I can certainly arrange through Dr. Stauffer a tour of the East Campus. It would be best if we did that during the day. I hate to say that because I'm available, but to see the students in action in the classes is really where the action is. We can even walk into a building and a classroom and you see some stuff, but to see it in action, I think would be much better. And the West Campus offers pretty much the same thing, only the welding building is phenomenal. So, but I'd offer if everybody would think about that a little bit. And next week, let's talk about it some more. If we want a tour, I can arrange it. If we want it during the day, we can do that, or evenings. Again, I'll look at everybody's schedule. But next week, if we can just remind ourselves to talk about that a little bit more, it would be enlightening for everybody to see what we really have to offer.
Yeah, I just see a problem occurring, like I said, in the the current environment out there with lack of trades. So, and when I see a problem, I want to find a solution. So, I don't know if that means getting together a simple survey to actually survey people out in the trades field to see if they feel there's a really get the pulse on them. See if they feel there's a issue with the training, the people aren't coming out trained properly, or if it's more just they're not driven. So, but like I said, I think there can be a strong push towards some of the best students in our school to go into trades, not just those students going to college, and then everybody that can make college go into the trades. I really think really think they can pave their way and do really well in the trades. So I'm just something I'm really pushing toward and seeing what we can do.
Sure. Any other unfinished business?
Yeah, back to the policy, since I have a chance right now to ask you some questions. In the past, when I had to review any documents, anything that was taken out had a line through it. And the new wording was either red or bold. So coming to the policies that I see presented for the review, and sometimes I had to go back to the original policies. It's a huge amount of work trying to figure out what was taken out and what was put in. Somehow the new examples don't clearly show that. So even like this is just example here, like I said in the past about the kindergarten, what was taken out in the new policy, it was just blank. It was not even existing there in 100, back in 100 series. In the old policy, the kindergarten portion was included. So it's hard to review the policies when you don't know what's taken out, what's coming in. Yes, is there anything that can be done so it could be actually more transparent to understand what changes are taking place, that you can ask proper questions?
So again, you subscribe to PSBA's policy making committee. I don't create those policies. I don't know. My understanding is they've always had lines crossed out.
These are brand new, start over.
So if that's the case, if they're new policies,
brand new.
They actually, and I looked, actually, I took the time to compare 100 policies with the old ones. They're not brand new. There are some paragraphs that are inserted, some things were taken out. Most of the language is very similar, like the same. So even when you go through the new policy, things that are bold, it seems like they might have been added, or it's just a new wording and replaced.
So it's a 903, we didn't do the 900. So they wanted me to update 903 to include parents and 45 minutes. So that's what the current policy format looks like. The new PSBA is the web-based section that has the school codes, and you put a little box and it comes up. So what the PSBA did was put everything into the new system. There is no revised date, there's no reading dates. It is brand new. They put everything in brand new. The parts that they voted were basically the new pieces that they edited and took out all the stuff that was more administrative regulations and policy. So they are brand new 2022 start out of the gates so that whoever takes over is state-of-the-art policy.
So again,
They won't be track change.
this is a PSBA committee. You're subscribing to their services. I don't control their format. So if you want clear distinctions, you can certainly request them from PSBA. You don't get the old policy prepared yourself. Aside from that, like I said, I don't-
You're not gonna get them because you're moving from what is PDF documents into board docs. So you're moving from a hard copy PDF to a web-based board doc system. You're not gonna get them track change. That was the whole purpose of getting everything electronically, so that when you go in and you change 200 enrollment 2 years from now, for whatever reason you want to update it, then it will be track changed in the system. But moving from a PDF to the docu system, you have to start as it never existed.
My understanding, we need to look at that policy as it's written. And
As
if
your
we have
starting
questions about this policy as it's written,
Correct.
we can't compare. We just have to say, okay, what's our questions about this policy?
Correct. Yes. And this policy that you're looking at, I'm just looking at 200 because I brought them out tonight, but in case you had questions. I have no problem going line, which drives Dr. Markley nuts, but I can go line by line by line, just as I do in the budget and explain it all. Because I live by these. I mean, I've written them for 20 years. That's what I've done. And I know the law that goes with these policies. I don't know the law that he deals with contract law, but I do know school law policies. And I could go through and say, this is what this means, and this is why this is here, and this is what, and I could talk to you what it used to be in the old policies for the most part. For instance, like the law changed for this year, for 2021, that it used to be that, students didn't have to come, they could exit out of school when you're 17. Now you have to stay until you're 18, and all students can stay until they're 21. It used to be that students who were reg ed had to leave when they were 18 and couldn't stay till they're 21. The law changed, and now everybody stays till they're 21. So if I'm a regular education student, not special ed, and I don't have my credits, I can stay till I'm 21 years old. I don't have to be just special ed. Like, I can explain all of that stuff. I don't need to pay him $200 an hour to sit here and explain all. Let's put it as a $650, I'm paying somebody else, so. But I can go through and explain, like, I know where most of the changes are just from reading case law and having to deal with all the other stuff that I deal with in the legal land right now as to why it is, or residency and foster and homeschooling. I mean, that's what I do. That's my world. And the curriculum and why it is the way it is and some of the other stuff. I mean, I can go through line by line. I could drive some board members nuts because that's, we don't really have a choice on them. They are what they are. They've all been vetted by PSBA's legal counsel, which is what we pay them for. But then when you change this, if you wanted to change something, then that's when it gets track changed in the system. But I can't make the web-based system go live until I get through all 900 series. And then you click on a little number, and then it actually pops up a school code section, and then that's what it reads. But I can't make that go live because the policies that PSBA has, because the board doc system was never used, goes back to predates me. And then they're so old, it's not even current policy. So like what we have in our 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 series isn't even the board approved policies, the ones that PSBA has. So I can't make that go live, which I think was the confusion. I think that you had emailed me about we had 2 sections of policy on the website and people get confused. So I've taken it down, but I can gladly go through them.
I do have some questions to the solicitor. Like, I started to review the policies in 200. What bothers me about the not checking immigration status. I am an immigrant. I got here legally, and I'm struggling with supporting people that are not U.S. citizens, taking money out of taxpayers' pockets to pay. And especially when we have Oprah's Commission full with American veterans, they're homeless. So I'm really struggling with this concept of not asking for immigration status.
So, Ms. Pfeiffer, to be honest, I don't have those policies in front of me. I think it'd be more productive to talk with Dr. Shank first to see if she can clarify your questions. And if she can't do it, send your questions to me. I will reach them.
Okay.
as opposed to just throwing out.
We did explain that we can't ask for it. We can't ask for it.
I have to ask if I hire somebody to work for me, I can't pay them under the table, I'm gonna get in trouble. To do all this stuff,
I don't have my file here. Can we-
all right.
can we- We're gonna, we sent the
Okay.
policies back to committee, so next
All
month
right,
we
yeah.
can tear into this.
So basically, if we have, and I'm asking everybody in the audience, please review the policies, please send the questions to the board, so we could address them. So now we have 60 days instead of 30. So please do the due diligence.
Please remember that the rules that the school, public schools operate under is not the same rules that the business world operates under. They're two different things. We tend to joke in the school world that there's school world and then there's the real world. So having been in business world for 25 years, the world that our business operated under is very different than the world that the school operates under. And you're right, in the business world, you have to prove immigration, you gotta prove paperwork, you gotta do all of that. In the school, public school world, you don't. In a private school, in a parochial school, yes. Public school, no. It's different. We don't have any choice. And that's one of the harder things to learn is that our rules are very different than the real world.
And to Dr. Schenk's point, most of these policies have footnotes to what supports them. You can actually click on those, or look them up and see where that language comes. 90% of the language is coming from the law or regulation.
Just here. It's all in the front part of the
It's all in
policy.
the front parts of the policies where it's coming. It's supposed to start.
Yeah, and then here's another one in 2003 in regard to health records that they could potentially be released to different organizations. As a parent, I would not want, without my parental consent, to have my child's health records to be released to somebody.
Yeah, I'm happy. to
And
answer
yes, I would
questions
like
about
somebody to
policy.
take a look at that language. Because that's working in the healthcare field, that's would be a violation of HIPAA.
Like I said, let's get into details at the,
Yes, I understand
Community.
also PSBA does, but they can take the case law from California, not from Pennsylvania. So, there's a lot of case laws. Drive the policy and exactly what you said, because you're not the one that's writing them up. We just adhere to them from an organization.
any other unfinished business? Anybody, any new business? Okay, I'll entertain the motion for adjournment. Mr. Heckman so moves. Dr. Markley and Fackley seconds that motion. Favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And anybody want to stick around? Good night, folks. See you next week.